All right, Ashley. I spent a lot of yesterday reading your intro article, which is
All
actually very
21
good.
pages.
Yeah, no,
Oh my
I
God.
read through all of it, which is really interesting. And I
You
feel like
may
I
be
know
one of
you.
the only people. So
Yeah,
congratulations.
I feel like I know you before we hopped on. But for the people that didn't read it, you want to just set the stage, give you a quick background. Maybe that'll lead into how you started Vermillion.
Yeah. And so just for context, if people haven't, we don't know what we're talking about with the 21 page blog post. I launched my fund recently. It's called Vermillion Plus Ventures. And I wrote like I was supposed to write like a very boring launch blog post that would have been like a paragraph and like I did thing, I write checks. And I tried to do that and it came out so formulaic, which is sometimes fine. And then I just started writing my like background and it turned into a 21 page Google Doc single spaced. And then I just posted it. So there's like this I keep calling it my manifesto. Like there's a 21 page document on my website of my entire background, how I got into tech, the companies I've worked at, and how I got to where I am. So it's embarrassing because if people have read that, they know my entire life, and then I have nothing to tell them, right? But I assume most people have hopefully not read that whole thing. Um, but Ashley Smith, founder and GP at Vermillion Cliffs. We do pre-seed and seed, dev data infra, security, AI infrastructure, really anything that developers will use to build something for developers is kind of my sweet spot. And my operating background has been early at Twilio, early at Parse, which was acquired by Facebook. Worked at Facebook for a while. Went to GitLab as a sent employee and CMO. Helped scale the business. And then went to GitHub not immediately after there was a break. I went to GitHub and did one of the five execs running that business in acquisition with Microsoft. So all my operating has been go to market for a technical audience. I'm an engineer by education. But I really like marketing and selling and building community for developers. And my entire VC value add, as we call it, is all go to market based, helping my founders just kind of figure out how to get those first, five customers that we can put on the website as a logo.
That's sick. I feel like the range is just like a lot broader than most
Yeah.
other people that I have on here. They're just like, yeah, I liked it. Their path to investing is a little bit more linear, where it's like, I don't know, it's like easier to condense it into like two lines.
Yeah.
Whereas your
Yeah.
experience is a lot broader. I feel like that's something I've been thinking about a lot because I think you see more and more of these new fund managers, solo GPs, whoever you want to call them, that double as fractional talent for the
Yeah.
portfolio. Like, was that a deliberate decision for you to kind of brand yourself as this like Swiss Army knife? Or just curious how you're thinking about your background as a differentiator for pre-seed
Totally.
seed checks.
Like I think there's different types of investors, as you know. Like there's the ones who are just checks and they can like give you money as you need it, and those are great. There's the ones that will get you like the introductions to the customers that you want, and like that's fantastic too. Like always when you're building a cap table, get people with different skill sets. I think what my unique thing is, and there's a few of us that are technical that have been go to market through our entire career that have kind of done more than just like sometimes when I say go to market, they think I just mean, oh, I launched products like product marketing style or demand gen or DevRel or sale, like whatever. I've done like everything because I'm one of those people that if there's a problem, I'll like raise my hand and try to solve it somehow, which is sometimes a bad thing. It's like a bad trait. But it gave me a very broad view of building companies from like zero to the first million, to the first 10. And then, at GitHub, obviously, I was in my mind later stage, but still, pretty like people call it early stage. In my mind, it was late stage. But yeah, so I find that the go-to-market space in general, like everyone should be thinking about go-to-market, like product eng everyone. And so when I say like I help with go-to-market, like I'm thinking about product strategy. Who are we going after? Like, okay, great. We have this giant community of, open source developers. Great. How do we turn that into a business? So I think it's broader than the like very specific, roles that people say they help with or like how they got into venture. But I help people fundraise. Like I help people build rounds. I help people pull in the right angels. I do therapy a lot, I found. Like yesterday or the day before, I had like an hour and a half long call, just like thinking through like what does a technical co-founder look like, right? And so I've just kind of seen a lot outside of my operating like in-house life. I've been advising companies forever. So there's probably like 100 that I've advised, and there's like 20 or so in my angel portfolio. And so I've just seen a lot of different things over the years, and I try to be helpful where I can, but I also try to not bother people if they don't need anything. Like I'm not going to reach out and bug a founder and be like, "Hey, you want to think about your go-to-market?" I'm going to wait for them to come to me. And so I think that's probably a little different than some of the other firms. There are some other firms doing similar things that are fantastic, but I'm like only focused on very technical founders building technical products.
Yeah. I think that last piece is interesting. And the right approach would be like being reactive and not like forcing your vision down the
Yeah.
throat of a founder. I feel like I talked
No,
to,
it doesn't work.
yeah. I
Yeah.
think there's like something that came out a few weeks ago where there's actually, I mean, I don't really know where they got this data from, but there's a negative correlation in between um, net promoter score and DPI, where like all these firms that are like positioning themselves as like service firms first, like they actually don't have the returns to back that up. And I think they've just kind of like,
Yeah.
I don't know, there's like a lot of assumptions that you can make as to why that is the case. I think
There's a lot
one,
of options. I would love to hear what you think.
I think one is that like maybe by acting as a service firm first, you are positioning yourself as like the visionary and you're clouding the founder's judgment by like inputting yourself too much and like how they're actually running the day to day. Whereas I think like the best investors, they like have the option to do that if they like if the founder asks for their help and they like need a specific problem solved, you can step in and you have the range to do that. But I
Yep.
think also the best founders like typically don't need that. And they're not gonna, I mean, and if they don't and they don't actually ask you for the help, I think it's best to just stay out of their way.
I totally agree. I mean, like, I'll go a step further, and I hate myself for saying this because I spend so much time like trying to be helpful. I think some of the best founders, not all, but some of the best founders are so sassy that if you
Hmm.
offer them help, they're like, leave me alone, I've got this. But the flip side of that is I also like founders that realize when they are out of their depth and they do need some help and know how to like, like if I were to give you advice about something, you should not only take my opinion and like that would be bad if you were just like Ashley said to do this, I'm gonna go do that. I think it's a matter of like finding a bunch of different perspectives and then helping you kind of move forward. But the best founders I've worked with, like I can tell them the same thing 12 times over and I don't like they won't implement it. And then at some point they'll get there and that's great because they've made that decision for themselves. I probably don't invest in people that will just do what I tell them because then they're just gonna probably not, know how to build a company in other ways. So yeah, I would be interested to see the data that you looked at because I don't disagree with it. Like I think that and also platform teams are hard. Like the value add platform team model is hard because you're just like jumping in trying to solve some problem for every single company, and all the companies are kind of different. And I do think it probably would end up skewing how someone's thinking about like pricing or website design or customer interactions or whatever. So uh, I could see how that data is accurate.
Yeah. I'll try to find it for you and send it over
Yeah.
after this call. I think the best founders, I mean, they have high agency. I
Mm,
think a byproduct of high agency is not wanting to be told what to do and wanting to figure out for themselves. And so
yep.
like then your job as an investor advisor, whatever you want to call it, is kind of like leading a horse to water, which
Yep.
is a separate skill set. And I can go on a tangent about that. But yeah, I don't know. I'll try to find the data and shoot it over.
Yeah, please do. Like I don't I'm thinking about everyone in my portfolio and every founder I've worked for or with, and none of them could be told what to do, and that's okay.
Yeah, I think it's good. I agree.
Yeah.
Um, on the operating side, I mean, I'm sure you probably met with tons of different VCs. Like how did that experience influence some of your fund strategy? And like, I don't know,
Yeah.
talk about like some people that have like anti-heroes or like anti-role models of like maybe there's like an example of what you don't want to be. You just kind of work backwards from that.
Yeah. I mean, I spent a lot of time both in a boardroom with some of the best VCs on the planet and saw how they kind of move through the world. at very different size firms. My fund is tiny and I like that. Um, and then I've also spent a lot of times, there's like the opposite end of that spectrum, where there's like a lot of people who say that they're investors or and they aren't really, and they try to like they've got the social media thing going, but they don't really have the actual thing going. And like that's the opposite. I think there's some interesting stuff happening in the middle where it's like people working super hard to do really good work, help their founders build great funds, and really like focus on returns. Like they're thinking about returns. So I think that I've seen it all. I think the things I don't want to be is like a loud voice in the room that doesn't add value. I think that's just I've seen that. I've been in a boardroom with that and it's really annoying and it spins everyone in the company out and no one knows what to actually do or listen or who to listen to. Um, I think more impactful is the other end, which is just like you just said, like leading a horse to water. Like just this is my experience. Here's how you could build your company. You don't have to, but like here's my experience. I think that's more impactful. I think I'm early stage, so I don't have to be as well. I will one day. But people aren't breathing down my neck yet. Like, where are the returns? Where are the exits? Why haven't your companies been acquired or IPO'd or whatever the thing is that we're measuring success by now? And so I think I've had to watch a lot of people that I respect deeply. They're building their funds, they're later stage, and they have to get returns. And so along the way, you're going to have to step on some toes. And I think that's the part that I get nervous about when I get to that point. Is I don't want to hurt feelings, but it's just part of the job. You like at the end of the day, we have LPs, right? And we want to help our companies be successful. Sometimes that doesn't happen. Most of the time that doesn't happen, and then we have to figure out what's next. And I think that I don't think about it today because my fund is new, but in 8 to 12 years or whenever the fund life cycle we're saying for pre-seed and seed is, I will be it'll be, some hard conversations, which will not be fun.
Yeah, maybe by then there would be an easier way to like sell on secondary because right now I feel like it's
Totally.
like relatively antiquated process where it's like
Yeah,
so much emphasis goes into exit via acquisition, IPO. It's like there are other outcomes here like that we
totally.
kind of forget about.
I
I mean,
think
I have
that
a
the same thing that's coming up is the secondary. I think that like if you're getting a whatever X from a company and you start to de-risk and starting to like put returns back into the fund, I think a lot of people are starting to do that and will start doing that. The IPO market's just scary for everyone because we see people go public, it goes poorly, and it just kind of it's
yeah.
not a great experience. And we've seen it's just been kind of a closed market for a while. So I think that alternative exit routes are going to start or are popping up and are going to continue to pop up. And I think that in, 8 to 10 years, it will just look different. I think everything's going to look differently, clearly, but I think that
Yeah.
our exit market will be very different.
I think there's I'm blanking on the name of the company, but like I've talked to a couple people that are trying to rebuild essentially what Carta X was trying to do, just
Mhm.
have like a trusted secondaries exchange. Um, because like you think about it from an LP's perspective, like when we were underwriting new funds, when I was still on the LP side, like over the last couple of years, like the only thing that really mattered is DPI. That's how you like start every conversation. It's like you can tell me
Yeah,
the story, you can tell me the narrative, like doesn't matter. Like I
they
literally
don't
need to
care.
show like were you actually able to distribute anything back to us? Like do
Yeah.
not show me TVPI, like don't care about it. And so I feel like because there's so much emphasis on that on the LP side, like maybe there's innovation or people working on solving that problem. Just like whenever there's a downturn in the future and there's like a closed IPO window for multiple years, like how do GPs create liquidity? And there's like interesting ways to do it now, but like all of them are like pretty difficult, like selling GP stakes and like doing some other things that like aren't necessarily good for you, the GP or the fund. That's a separate tangent. I feel like I could just like rant about
Yeah,
this for a
I've seen
while.
people start thinking, yeah, people start thinking, I've noticed people are thinking through it a lot, and some of the larger LPs are starting to figure out good routes that gives the exits that the fund managers need, but still makes it so they can make a lot more money on the upside. So I think it's going to continue to evolve, and even more so. Like, I think the next 18 months, things will look very different than they do right now from a exit perspective. Because if the
Yeah.
IPO market's going to open up, we all have to just make peace with that and
Yeah.
figure out an alternative. Because like we've been going through this for a while, like it's probably time to figure out the alternative. So
Yeah. Um, what are some non-obvious things you look for when evaluating technical teams and product people? Asking as a non-technical
Yeah.
person that kind of
Yeah.
like teaches myself how to use Zapier and Replit and things like
Yeah.
that.
Well, curiosity obviously is important. I think when I'm talking to founders, one of the questions I always ask is who's talking to customers? Like on the customer calls, who is on the call? And if the answer isn't like, let's say it's like a two-person founding team or a three-person founding team, if it's not like two of the founders, and it's because of an important call, like I want two of the founders or like even three sometimes. But I want everyone to be able to talk to customers. I don't want to be in a world where it's like, oh, so and so can't be in front of customers. I'm like, okay, well then that person can't manage a team and that person can't like they can build great, but they need to be able to understand the product feedback directly from the customer. I think that's one big bucket. I think natural curiosity is important, just like figuring out stuff on their own and not begging me for help on every single little thing, I think has been important. And I've seen a few people not nail that. And I'm like, oh no, I get it now. Okay. Um, the belief that they can just do anything, like it might be coming from nowhere, right? But I want to feel like they believe in what they're building. Is in the same way that my investors want to believe that, like, want to feel that I believe that I can build this, outperforming fund. So yeah, I don't look for people out of specific colleges. I don't look for people that have, worked at specific companies. Second time founders, third time founders are great because they've, seen around the corners of certain things. But my portfolio is all over the place. I've got founders that, went straight into founding a company straight out of high school. I've got founders that have been at all the big companies. I've got ones that worked at startups. I've got ones that are on their, third company. So it's really all over the place, but I look for natural curiosity, ability to have a conversation with customers, great managers, and just like the belief that they're going to succeed.
This kind of leads into the next question I was going to ask you, but kind of like related to that. Do you just think there's going to be more and more of a focus on soft skills over hard skills for engineering talent?
Yeah, I think, look, like I work with some of the best technical minds in the world, and I can like name them easily. I'm actually texting with one right now about a like non-technical thing. We're like talking shit, which is the best. But I've worked with some of the most incredible technical minds that have like lived, and there's just something about that ability to build and figure out new things and create that I don't think that you can replicate currently with an AI. Like, you can't be like, I'm not technical, but I'm going to use AI to build this thing. Like, there's just certain things that you can't do. I'm talking about the now state. I'm talking about 20 years from now. So, if I invest in a company that's a security company, I want it to be created by like people that have been thinking about security for a very long time, right? In a very, very like, don't have their pictures on LinkedIn, cover their cameras on their computer kind of way, which is I do that. Everyone should do that. Um, I think that I consider someone technical if they have even worked in the technical capacity, like have worked in go to market on a multiple technical companies. Like that person still has to kind of understand the basics of tech. I think that person's still deeply technical, but I need a founder building the core of the business, like the core of the product, because they're going to be in it every day. And I want to make sure that that person deeply understands that world and can build it. I don't think that AI is going to replace that part of engineering anytime soon.
That makes sense. That makes it. Yeah, I feel like I've just been like thinking through. I mean, talked about it a second ago, but like I don't code. I've played around with Replit, Cursor, like all the other
Yeah,
AI co-pilots for coding, and like I'm able to build stuff within a day
totally.
just by like being okay at prompting. And so, and then you also simultaneously you see the drop off and like new engineering roles posted. So I've just been thinking through and like talking to people smarter than myself of like what changes
Yeah.
all of that takes place. It's like, is there like more or less of a focus on specific skill set? Um, like I'm just thinking through like the evolution of engineering roles. But you obviously have a better vantage point than I do.
I mean, I think it's a lot of different things. You know, we've seen a few rounds of layoffs in the last, what is it, 3 or 4 years, and we had something to blame it on each time, right? And so I think the recent hot new thing to blame, like we're not hiring more engineers, or we're slowing down on hiring, or we're laying off an engineering team, is really just like how you actually just need to lay off, you know, poor performers, or you've hired a team that you don't actually need, which is like a management problem, right? And so we're blaming a lot of like we want to, get rid of poor performing engineers. And like to be clear, poor performance is like relative. Like they may be great engineers, but like we're on a weird team, had a weird manager. Like there's so many pieces to that. So I think we're covering that and bad management, hiring the wrong teams, and also some other stuff with random excuses. And right now, I think the excuse is like AI. We don't need to hire more, and not like, oh, our revenue flatline because our company is not growing as quickly as it needs to because we're not building new products. We're just shoving the same old products down people's throats. And so I think then you get the press cycle that goes on top of it, and people that don't understand tech, not that I understand all of it, but they don't understand that a lot of it is people picking up a buzzword and then making it negative. Whereas it's just the same thing that's been happening forever, which is like we've forever been laying off people that are low performers. We've forever been, managers have been making bad decisions and hiring the wrong team and then needing to figure out how to push those out of the company. I think previously, tech could just grow in a way that wasn't as measured. Like, you remember this, like startups would get like all this funding, hundreds of millions of dollars, and have zero revenue. And like that doesn't happen anymore. And so we're just building more efficient companies. And that's the same for the bigger companies as well. So I don't think engineering roles are disappearing. I think that's just more intentional hiring and more efficient hiring.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, that's kind of like a theme that I'm exploring more of. It's just, I think the vanity metric that venture-backed companies are chasing now is growing revenue per employee or
Yeah.
employee efficiency, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, Obviously, like a lot needs to happen in order for that to take place. Like that essentially becomes consolidation of all these different department heads, like including like all the finance department consolidated, marketing department consolidated, engineering department consolidated, where you just give like individual contributors tons of leverage where they don't need to manage a team. Also think if that does play out, I think that rewards specific skill sets and maybe punishes others. It's like a very meta question. So I don't know. I'm just kind of like
It's gonna cycle
rambling on.
around forever.
Yeah.
Like I watched it cycle. So for a long time, it was like, no managers, we can manage ourselves. And then it was like, let's hire 4 layers of managers because nothing is actually getting done. There's no product being built. So it's just
Yeah.
like this cycle. And I've seen it go, I've seen it cycle 3 or 4 times now. And so now we're getting back to the like, I do think there's a way to build efficiently with less people. I do think that for a long time, hiring headcount was the metric, and I think that was always the wrong metric. And so I think that we're just going into a new world where we've seen it before, but it's more efficient hiring and more efficient building, which is I think probably a good thing.
Yeah.
We were pushing a lot of people into boot camps and saying there were all these, engineering roles for new grads, and like there are, but you still have to be able to do the job. And so I think that there was almost an unfair push in some ways because the boot camps then started monetizing, and so then you're just like
Right.
pulling all of these people in that maybe like didn't actually want to be an engineer, right?
Yeah.
So I think we're just seeing the results of that also kind of happening.
Yeah. I totally agree. I guess more on like the go to market side.
Mm.
There's a question I've been thinking through of just like I saw a tweet somewhere recently where it was just like the evolution of go to market strategy and you think about like what worked in the past, like even like 5, 10 years ago is like really changed to today. Whereas like originally you would do like you would reserve massive budget for paid ads, LinkedIn ads, you name it. And now you just have like these very front facing CEOs acting as chief marketer. You used to have
Yeah.
gated white papers. Now you have smaller in-person events. You used to have all of this production work going into like webinars or other things that like people don't really care about as much. It's just like relentless content production. Um, but I'm curious how you're seeing it again from your vantage point, and like how you're seeing stuff on the go-to-market side when it's becoming harder and harder to actually win over new business.
Totally. It changes. every day. And I think it's not one size fits all. So I think the key to good go to market is being able to just try a lot of different things and then realize when something's not working, try something else. So anytime someone presents like a year-long go-to-market plan to me, I'm like, let's go quarter by quarter for now, right? Let's just like think about the quarter. Um, there were days when people were I mean, I remember the days of mailers, right? They were like, it wasn't that long ago, it was like 10 years ago. People were still mailing out like things. The cooler version of that was mailing someone a t-shirt, which I kind of wish I still got t-shirts. I got one the other day and I was like, oh my
Yeah, bring that one
God.
back. Bring that one
Yeah, I'm
back.
like,
I would love
bring
more
back
business.
swag. It's just so expensive though. So yeah, I think, you know, it depends on your audience. So if we're trying to build like a developer community or a community, it's all about like getting the founders on these social medias, including LinkedIn, because LinkedIn is the best performer right now, which is mind-blowing to anyone that is like seeing the evolution of social media. Um, is it get them a Substack? Is it Blue Sky? Like whatever it is, like make sure they're kind of everywhere and talking about relevant things in that space. Whereas we used to be like, just be quiet on social media.
Yeah.
Like don't say anything. I think the webinar thing, it was super enterprisey for a long time, and they used to be really good at getting the right enterprise buyer in the door. I think now you have to just be more interesting than that, and it doesn't quite work as well. But I've got a company now that webinars are working really well. So it's like it still does kind of work in certain spaces. Uh, but I think you have to just keep it interesting. I think your website has to be pretty interesting, constant content creation, stay super close to customers. So I think that you can't just like assume the customers will stick with you. Like you have to work really hard for like keeping that contract and the expansion. But it's not one size fits all. Everyone's always like, "What are the first 10 things you would do if you took a role?" And I'm like, "Well, there's like 100 things, and then hopefully three of them work, right? And
Yeah.
then you just do more of those things." But throwing a ton of ad spend, a ton of budget at ad spend probably isn't the best thing right now. But now people are figuring out how to advertise in ChatGPT. So like that's probably
Yeah.
the next thing, right? Like
Yeah.
there's going to be something else that's those big corporations that were making money off of ad spend are not going to just walk away from that money. They're going to figure out a new way
Yeah.
to take the same revenue in. So
Totally. I feel like a lot of it kind of starts with not narrowing down an ICP far enough. I don't know if you follow, there's a guy who used to be at OpenView. I think his name's Kyle Poyar.
yeah,
He
I used to work
writes,
with him. I was
okay.
with him for a while. Yeah, not a while,
He
but like enough.
I've never met him. He just seems super sharp. I'm on his Substack, and he had a really good piece like a couple months back about just like how narrow you have to be with your ICP and how you're defining
Yes.
it. And he gave all these examples. I was like, wow, all right. I was just thinking like very surface layer, where like, I mean, in my case with the community, it's like we're ideally targeting like junior investors. That's people that work in venture capital and like
Yes.
analyst, associate, principal role. And he's like, that is way too broad, and you're not being like as targeted as you could be. So like your language changes, like how you position the offer changes, like all depending on like who the person that you're marketing to. Um, so I think like starting with that and like anybody listening, like find that piece, figure out
Yeah.
who the actual ICP is, and then like work backwards from there. I wish I would have done that.
Yeah. That's the first off, Kyle's amazing. You should talk to Kyle. He's one of my favorite people. But I've seen a lot of companies fail because they could not get the ICP right. And even if the product's incredible, they could not figure out who needed the product or how to sell the product. And so I think in the early days, especially, you need to really narrow it down.
yeah. I'm copying this from your parse story and your fund announcement, just for
Uh,
proof that I read the
yeah,
whole thing.
I'm so sorry.
What do you what do you think about hiring the unhireable? That was the quote you used in there.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two sides to it. I think unhireable and I call myself unmanageable a lot, which is really true. But I think unhireable is different. I think unhireable is the person that's at some cushy job somewhere that's making X amount of money per year and they're happy as a clam, right? I think that just keep those people close, like have them advise on some projects. Like you never know, life changes. And so what I find is a lot of founders let's say someone's hiring for product marketing, and I'm like, oh, here's 10 people that I've either worked with before and know are good, whatever. And oh my God, do you think they would ever leave insert giant company here or insert great startup here? And I'm like, maybe not today, but in a year you're still going to need product marketing, or in 2 years, and life changes. So get to know that person. Also, in that conversation, get some great tips about what like you could use that are going to apply to your company. And so everyone is, you know, everyone is unhireable in some way, right? Some people might be like, "Oh, you need to be San Francisco based," and they say, "Well, I live in Iowa or something." That might change in a year. You never know. So, always talk to the unhireable people because life changes and they will become hireable at some point, or they don't, and you just have a great close person to the company that is great at product marketing or sysops or like whatever the thing is. It's okay to make friends with the company that might one day join. You see that a lot in open source. A lot of if you have an open source project that really takes off and you're like, oh, I'm going to build something to for the enterprise that can make it easier to use this project internally at big company, you'll see people start to just like hire all the biggest open source contributors, who like are kind of usually unhireable because they have jobs elsewhere and the open source project is their like thing they like to work on. So yeah, just always try because everyone at some point is looking for a new role or wants to do something new.
Totally. Um, I know you got 2 minutes. Do you have a hard stop? I got two more questions for you.
Yeah,
Okay.
I've got it's noon here. At noon, I think I have something. You're good.
Okay. I'll try to go quick. What's the worst part about venture? Nobody talks about.
Hmm. A lot, but not like it's like a dream job, right? For me at least. Like to me, I'm like, this is amazing. I love this job. But I don't think people realize I'm speaking only for being a single like solo fund manager, right? There's a lot of back office involved. Like there's a lot of my time is just spent like on tax, audit,
Yeah.
making sure that I've got like all the right docs, legal. Like I spend so much time on that piece of it. And so I think that part, when you're a solo GP, that's the piece where I'm like, oh my God, I can't wait to just offload this on someone. Um, Saying no to a founder that you spend a lot of time with, obviously is worse for them than it is for you, but it does, I like it feels bad because you know that, they could be the next huge company, but it just doesn't fit in with my portfolio for some reason. Or like I've done too many seed checks this quarter. I need to do more pre-seed and I try to give clear reasons, like very direct, single line, like clear reasons of why as best as I can, but I still don't like doing the rejection part. And like most of the job is rejection. The same thing is true of like our LPs, our investors. Most of them are going to tell you no, right? So like we
Yeah.
go through a lot of rejection and then we also have to reject a lot of people, which doesn't feel good. Um, Companies fail. That feels bad too, because like you feel like a lot of my founders like take it. They're like, I'm so sorry. I failed you. And I'm like, it's part of the game. Like that's what this we're expecting a lot of it, to not take off. So yeah, those are the bad things. I think the good greatly outweighs the bad. I really like working with founders. Like I really like all day long just sort of figuring out problems with them. I try to add value in the first call versus like interviewing them, because I feel
Yeah.
like I learn so much more about people when I just ask them questions and kind of like try to solve a problem with them. Also, I can't pay attention if someone's reading a deck at me, and I feel bad because you see them
Yeah.
like they start to get nervous, and I was like, it's not, I can't listen to a deck, so like, why don't I just ask you some questions, and then if you need to reference a deck, that's fine. But that's a me problem.
I think
But
it's a
yeah,
me problem too.
yeah, I can't do it.
I
I
don't
blame
think
like TikTok or something. Like I can't pay attention to a
I
deck.
don't think anybody likes
Um,
interviews in the first place. Like I think it's supposed to
no.
be, I don't know. Like I think it should
Well,
just be like more natural than that, where it's
totally.
just
And I've done the fundraising route before, right? Like I've helped fundraise, and some VCs can make you feel really small and like, you're lucky to be in their presence, and I just never want to be that way. And so I try not to be. But yeah, I think the good outweighs the bad. But there's definitely some like, there's some weird parts of the job that are just like, oh my God.
yeah.
But I like it.
I wrote there's a piece like 2 years ago. I just wrote like 99 takeaways of things that I guess well, I just framed it as 99 brutally honest takeaways about venture.
Yeah,
It's like the most divisive piece that I've ever written. But like some people, I don't know, I think one thing in there that you said is like, I think it is a really isolating job. I think, especially as
totally.
a fund manager, like you get told no all the time and then you return the favor and you tell other people no all the time. It's like you got to have a pretty strong support group around you because like if you just do it all by yourself, I think it's like you will go insane. Like you need somebody to like,
Oh, totally. I've got people that are fund managers that we have like text groups being like, "Oh my God, this this LP was just so mean to me. I did so much work here," or
yeah,
like I was like griping. But I've got a good support group of people that are both emerging managers and also been doing it for a long time. I've got great LPs. Like my LPs probably think I probably tell them too much at this point, but I'll be like, "Hey, this thing happened. Can you help me?" So I really do lean on my Screen Doors is one of my LPs and they're like fantastic. Sapphire's one of my LPs, they're fantastic. And I bug them to death, I think, because I'm always asking, hey, is this weird? Did I do this wrong? Because there's a lot to learn in your first fund, but it can be a very lonely job. Um, I totally agree. I don't think people realize that. And even I think if you're a partner to big funds, like even like, oh, you have a team around you, like that's what everyone's always tried to sell me on when they're trying to hire me into a bigger fund. You're still really working by yourself in a lot of
yeah,
cases.
yeah.
So,
Just constantly on an island.
yep.
Last question I got for you. Are there any other emerging managers that really impressed you over the past few years?
Define emerging. Do you think emerging is like,
Fun. Yeah, that's a good question because I talked to LPs and they have a say it's like
I
$100 million
can't,
fund three is
like,
not an emerging
yeah,
manager.
I'm like, have I emerged? I don't
Like
know. Um,
like
I'll put,
sub 20 fund one or two is
oh
how I would
man, you just
define it.
narrowed it down. I'll give you like a few people that I mean, I don't know who's emerging anymore at this point. I, uh, I think Tim Chin at Essence is doing some great stuff in my space. Um, do you know Ariel Winton? She just launched the Aligned Fund.
I don't think so.
I think maybe I don't know what size, but might be she's emerging. She was at OpenView for a while. She's fantastic. She's like doing only Series A's. She's brilliant. I've known her for a while. Bajrul has he was a Figma product lead for a long time. I like him because he's very direct. And he's like he's good. Sees some great stuff. Uh I work with Jaron Glover a good bit if you spent time with him. He does some great stuff. Kevin at Rack House, I think the fund size is too big, but like he's
Yeah,
kind of
sharp.
emerging, like but like there's a lot. That's the interesting thing is there's a lot of really smart people building their own firms right now, and I do think like the big funds are that are multi-stage and the big brand names are always going to be around. But I do think this interesting new class of people coming up have a lot to say, and they're good,
Yeah,
and I think that people are noticing. I think a lot of LPs are noticing, and I think founders are starting to notice because I've noticed that they like want the scrappier, newer funds in their company more so than there's always going to be like the top five, right? And they're always going to be great. We all want the top five in our companies, but there's like that middle ground of firms that I think are going to slowly start to go away, and these
yeah,
like the new class is going to kind of start to take over, and it's been happening. Like I've been
yeah,
watching friends of mine beat out those like middle tier funds. So we'll see if that continues, and a lot of great VCs are spinning out and making their own fund too, which I think is interesting.
yeah. It's like golden era. Starting a fund.
It does, like I think that it's really hard to start a fund right now. And so the people that are starting a fund right now, in the same vein, like the people that are starting companies right now, really want to be in this business and have something special about them. And I think it's going to be a great class of companies and it's a great class of new funds.
Yeah, totally. Um, well, sweet. That's all I got. That was
Yeah.
incredible.
I mean, incredible's probably the wrong word, but yeah, I hope I hope I answered your questions. And yeah, anytime I can be helpful, let me know.
Yeah, I will.